Hello and welcome back to the Loyal Sun Show. That's at the Loyal Suns on all of your social medias. Follow us here and follow us there for Pitt Sports content you will not want to miss. If you love that football is fully back and hate the word or, this is the place for you. The Loyal Sun Show, a safe, sunshiny place for your Pitt Athletics fix. Gentlemen, it is August 26th, 2024, a Monday. In several days, it will be Saturday. Do you know what Saturday is?
It's the opener. It's the day we get to go tailgate and drink beers in a parking lot at 7:30 a.m.
God, that makes me jealous.
But we all get to watch Pitt football after that time passes and beers are consumed and
Or not consumed.
true.
So we'll all be enjoying Pitt football at various capacities in various mental states. But that voice that you heard bemoaning his required sobriety on Saturday is the Post-Gazette's very own Stephen Thompson. Stephen, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm very good. I spent last weekend at the beach, visiting some family, and now I get to ponder this revolutionary offense that Pitt is going to run with two quarterbacks, and this defense that's going to have 5 defensive tackles at once. Apparently, this is an exciting time. Pitt is really changing the game of football right before our eyes.
Wow, you sound really enthused, very optimistic.
Yeah, I am. In all honesty, like I'm going to show up at Acrisure Stadium on Saturday. I'm going to see that stadium dressed up in blue and gold, and I'm going to be really excited, like I always am, because, I don't know, it's just cool. You only get 12 game days a year. I hope I didn't sound too, sarcastic or like I was bemoaning going to a game on Saturday, because I like doing this. I mean, this is like, whenever I complain about my job, I have to remember that like I watch football and basketball for a living. Like I have it better than a lot of people. So I don't mean to sound bitter at all. I am genuinely very excited, but man, trying to parse some of the things on the step chart do give me a headache sometimes.
I know we were looking forward to this for a while now because there was a lot of questions. You hear some rumors from camp and you're like, well, what are they actually going to tell us? And then it happens and we have more questions than answers. And Pat Narduzzi does not like answering questions. So what was it like for you down there today? Were you expecting some secrecy behind the quarterback position and elsewhere?
I think as far as the quarterbacks, I did expect there to be an or. I didn't expect them to kind of give us anything, but I thought they would know who their guy was. So when Narduzzi said that they're going to play both Nate Yarnell and Eli Holstein, I was pretty surprised. I felt like I had a bunch of questions paired trying to like pry into like, I thought Pat was going to kind of give us the impression that like, oh, we're going to see who's going to be the starter in practice. And he did kind of lead with that. But eventually then he says, well, both guys are going to play. And that kind of threw me for a loop a little bit because I think it's generally kind of weird to walk into a season without a number one guy. I think just from like a leadership perspective, a confidence perspective, like when so much other stuff is weird and when so much other stuff is changing, you have new offensive coordinator, an entirely different offensive staff. You've got a few new starters all around. I feel like you would want a sure thing, whether that's Eli Holstein or Nate Yarnell. You want the guy in the middle of the huddle to be certain about who he is and what his position is on the team, and I think you want everyone else to be kind of certain about that. But I think it became clear over the course of that press conference that, this is an exhibition game in Pat Narduzzi's mind. This is a scrimmage. This is the preseason that they don't get. I think all of the ors reflect that. I think the fact that they are playing a Kent State team that, is probably the worst team in the FBS this year, except for like Kennesaw State, who's making the leap from FCS this year. If you're an S&P Plus guy from Bill Conley at ESPN, that's like football KenPom. They finished 133rd out of 133 teams in S&P Plus last year. They're 130th going into this season. Like,
So they got better.
Yes, they did. They improved. This
Good
is
for
an
them.
improved Kent State team. But they're still not very good, and I think Pitt kind of expects to roll over them to get a win. So I think this is going to be a lot of experimenting, and I think they're going to use this game to figure a lot of things out, and they have to. So because clearly there are a few sure things like anywhere on the step chart. I think the linebackers are who they are, the safeties are who they are, the corners seem pretty set, and the offensive line is generally pretty set as well. Gavin's your tight end, but like everything else is kind of up in the air, like from quarterback, running back, wide receiver, defensive tackle, defensive end, like down to like kickoff returner and punt returner, which also like is Kenny Johnson and Desmond Reed as your kickoff and punt returners. Like when last year in a much slower offense, he took Bub Means off kickoff return because he was afraid of tiring him out. So like I don't think that's going to stick either. So I think there's a lot of things that they need to sort through, and I think the fact that they tabbed Kent State for this opener at home is not an accident. I think this is a soft landing for a new offense and a new coaching staff and a lot of new starters and a lot of new players into the 2024 season.
I'm not too fearful of Kent State, although I know I shouldn't say
bold.
that without knocking on every piece of wood I can find being a Pitt fan. I've experienced games against FCS teams that have gone very, very poorly. But like the rotating quarterbacks thing, even if you think you can walk over Kent State with either of those guys playing, taking their reps, neither of them have to get in a rhythm. The big issue I have with it is we're breaking in a brand new offense and we're staring down the barrel at Cincy and West Virginia the next two games. And the way I feel is if you think one of those guys is the better quarterback, we need to get them as many reps as possible so we can work out some of those kinks, some of the procedural issues. And so before we go to Cincinnati and have 5 pre-snap penalties by the guy who maybe only played 4 drives the previous week.
So do we actually think it's still up for debate whoever plays better is going to win the job, or is there somebody with like a pretty good inside track? Because it seems like Holstein, he did say Holstein caught up to him. Does that mean Holstein's the guy because he looked better over the past few weeks?
Well, I think caught up is interesting because that kind of means they're at the same level right now to me. And then you kind of throw in the fact that Nate Yarnell has actually like played college football before. I think that would kind of give him the edge in my book. Like, I think everyone's kind of generally right that like Eli Holstein, obviously he was a 4-star guy, played at Alabama and everything like that. Probably has the higher ceiling. I don't think that's unfair to say. But I think you just look at the broader context. You look at a head coach who went 3-9 last year, who is breaking in a new offense, who things don't go well this year. If things look like they did last year, is going to be on the hot seat going into next year. I'd be pretty surprised if he doesn't roll with the guy that he knows, the guy that he recruited, the guy that he trusts. Then again, he kind of threw a curveball at us and hired a guy to run an up-tempo spread offense this offseason. So maybe he's just putting all his trust into Cade, and the guy that Cade recruited in Eli Holstein, I don't really know. I think I know what I would pick, but then again, I'm not in practice every day watching these guys every day. I still feel like Yarnell has the inside track. I feel like the fact that he has been the declared starter really up until now, like even as recent as last week, like or maybe 2 weeks ago, when I asked Narduzzi about the quarterbacks, he was like, yeah, Nate's our starter for now. It is very recent. I think when Pat says he caught up to Yarnell, like that's a pretty recent phenomenon. I think he was making progress and showing things, but the whole caught up thing that was today. That happened. Today is the first time that we've actually heard that from Pat.
So it might be the
question is, I think the reason for going with 2 quarterbacks, you hope somebody is the clear winner. Someone looks good, someone doesn't look as good. Or maybe you have a guy that you want to start, but you want him to win the job officially in real game action. So if he does that, the decision's easy. What happens if they both go out there and are pretty unimpressive against Kent State? We're in the same position. both guys probably aren't feeling good about themselves. No one got into a rhythm, and Narduzzi is going to wait until the first snap to announce a starter next week, maybe. Who knows? And that accomplishes nothing.
Yeah, I feel like that's your worst case scenario. I mean, then I guess you just take it. You kind of take it into Cincinnati week. You see who game plans better or picks up the game plan better, I guess. I don't know. I think they have things that there's like a general checklist of what you want. Like you want a guy who takes care of the ball. You want a guy who can get the ball to the playmakers and everything like that. So I don't know. I think you should. I think that's a very valid concern. Like, especially that, like, you know, is it going to be, you know, Yarnell gets two or three series and then Holstein comes in? Does he get a quarter? Does he get a half? Like, I think how they split up the reps too, like the organization of this rotation. You know, is it just straight one guy starts, one guy finishes the game, or does one guy start, he comes out, and then he comes back in? Like, I think that's a very interesting thing to watch as well, because you're gonna be able to make a lot of excuses for either guy. I think, like if you're a big believer in Holstein and he comes in cold off the bench and only gets, you know, a quarter, whatever, before he goes back to the bench, you're going to be able to say, well, yeah, of course he sucked. He didn't have, you know, wasn't able to get into a rhythm. He didn't, you know, have as many reps with the first team or whatever. And, you know, if Yarnell gets pulled early, you say, well, he didn't have a full game. You know, he didn't, you know, this, that, and the other. Like, you're going to be able to make a lot of excuses for either guy if it comes down to that. And at that point, I feel like Narduzzi's just going to go with his gut, quite honestly. Like, at that point, what else would you – like, if both guys don't look very good against Kent State, what else do you have to go on, you know?
Yeah, David loves hearing that. Narduzzi going with his gut.
Yeah, no, he's definitely earned a lot of trust and goodwill among Pitt faithful.
Especially with quarterbacks.
Yeah, right. He's definitely done really well with quarterbacks outside of the one guy who is kind of gift wrapped to him from God, and just had a lights out senior year because of the offensive coordinator that Narduzzi hated. But that's neither here nor there. I will say my first reaction when I saw the news that there was the or between the quarterbacks and that they'd be trading series possibly against Kent State, I said, my only prediction for the outcome of this is that it is mishandled in some capacity and costs us at least a game this year. So you know, I think it's suffice to say, I'm not seeing sunshine and rainbows right now.
David will be taking Cincinnati first half money line. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to ask which game.
Free money.
Which game does it cost them?
Not Kent State,
Yeah.
Not Kent State, but I don't know. Well, let me ask you: do you think that the plan is to, like, this is the one tryout and then he wants to make a decision, or even some of the quote almost sounded like he was planning to pick a starter this week during practice and then just let them both play anyway because we're playing Kent State. So I couldn't tell. Is this the final audition, this game, or is it the preparation leading up to it? How long do you think we could see this drag out? Because that'll decide if I'm putting money on Cincinnati or West Virginia.
Well, I think if practice had kind of any bearing on this, we would have a starter by now. I think he's really waiting to see what these guys do in stadium against another opponent. So I think it's really all going to come down to what they do on Saturday. I would not expect them to drag it out into Cincinnati. I think, for better or worse, they're gonna pick a guy to play the whole game against Cincinnati, or, you know, play until the wheels fall off, I guess. I can't imagine that they would, you know, have gone through 4 weeks of training camp plus however many weeks of spring practices and then say, we just need one more week of practice before we figure out who the guy is. I think this is really all about their game performance. So yeah, Saturday is kind of big for not no reason, but I don't know. Like someone asked us, like, is this me and Carter, like for on our mailbag thing, like, is this the right decision? You know, like, is this the right way to handle this? And the only thing I can kind of come up with is like, if you don't know who your guy is, then yeah, probably. Like if you haven't reached a conclusion yet, then this is really the only thing you can do, I guess.
Well, so that's a really good point. And I obviously had a little bit of a negative outlook on the way they've decided to go about it because of all the trust that I lost in Narduzzi in the last year. But Squid, you had a really good point that kind of brought me over to the other side. And I think, Steven kind of started hinting towards it at the end there.
Yeah, we've talked about this on the pod in previous weeks. The 2-quarterback system never is really beneficial in the long run. You can only think of a handful of times where it ever actually worked or wasn't like a clear cut. This guy was so much better. Why would we waste our time giving the other guy any reps? Even Nate Peterman and Chad Voidick for Pitt's sake. But if you look back at last year, Narduzzi picked one guy and he was so bad. And we played that guy for so long. The second the other guy played, he was already better. And we were like, wow, why didn't we say that earlier? So maybe because last year was so bad and Narduzzi's decision, if it was his, and I don't know if he wants to deflect that to Frank Signetti still, was so bad. Now we will be able to see with our own eyes too. If Eli Holstein is amazing and Nate Yarnell is bad, there's no way he'll play the guy who played bad against Kent State. And we'll see with our own eyes too. It's like, well, Pat, it's this or nothing.
Yeah, I mean, like he can't like afford to. I mean, I think like I think you saw how poor like the beginning of last season went, and that just kind of set the tone for the rest of the year. Like it was hard to recover from that. So there was a quote from earlier in the year. I can't remember how exactly he worded it, but Pat said he has gone over with Cade Bell, like how long the leash is going to be for the guy who does become the starter, and what the kind of criteria for pulling a guy is going to be. They have a plan for what's going to happen if the guy they pick isn't the guy. At least that's what they said to us, and I don't know what that plan entails. I don't know what exactly that means, but they have at least thought about it. It isn't going to be 3 weeks aren't going to pass before they start to think, oh shit, maybe we should pull this guy. I think there's going to be a quicker trigger, especially because I think if you had walked into a season knowing who your guy was, at least coming out of camp, that would have, I think that would have inclined me to kind of give a guy a longer leash. Like, I was so certain about this guy going all the way through camp. Like he looked like the guy for so long. If you're still uncertain at this point, I don't think they're going to have a problem not cycling through guys, but saying, look, we weren't certain about you from the jump. We gave you some faith early, but you're not living up to the standard. We can't really afford to do this. You're out. Whoever else the next guy is in. So I don't know. We're trying to examine the psychology of like Pat Narduzzi right now as it comes to quarterback decisions, which I think is not easy to do, and we're never actually going to be inside his head about it. But
we're thinking about hiring an intern who does that. They fact check Pat Narduzzi in his press conferences, sort of like the politics now. You have all these fact checkers. We're going to have a Pat Narduzzi fact checker, and we're going to have someone that tries to
analyze
to figure it out. But they're going to try to analyze what he's thinking at all times. What his next move will be.
Yeah, you need like a body language specialist. You need like a psychology major. They can work together to figure out what Pat Narduzzi means when he says.
I don't think anybody would take that job. It sounds absolutely miserable, but in theory, if we could do that, it would be very hilarious.
I wish we had the power to put community notes on a couple of Pitt Beat reporters' tweets today that were just direct quotes of Pat Narduzzi, like, "Hey, we've never shortened the playbook against a lesser opponent for a strategic advantage," and the community notes would just say, "Yes, the fuck you have."
Well, and that's so we like talked a little bit about this before we started recording, but like, okay, so he definitely did that in 2016 against Villanova with Penn State on the horizon. Would anyone be pissed at him if he did do that? Like, he employed some gamesmanship to win a massive game against your biggest rival. Like, would anyone get mad at him for doing that? Like, I don't think so. Like, what's the point of like fibbing about that? I don't get it.
I would say that the Rhode Island game and the Wofford game, yeah, you could be justified in getting mad at him about that.
I mean, like, was that offense going to be good if they opened it up against Wofford? Or, I mean, that. So, you know, I get it. Izzy did carry a lot of that 2022 offense, but like that offense was going to be him or nothing, no matter what.
I think at the time we thought it could have been, but in hindsight, it was just bad the whole time.
And it just never hurts to get a couple more reps in with your guys. I mean, obviously nothing was going to make Phil a replacement level quarterback last year, but you got to imagine, you know, if letting him throw it a little bit against Wofford doesn't at least improve his mentals a little bit, it at least lets us know a couple weeks earlier, like, oh, he can't make these passes against Wofford. Who's that French Canadian kid on the bench?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Like, I feel like we saw that against West Virginia, and it still took 3 more weeks for them to pull him. So I don't know.
I'm putting the foot down right here. We're done. We're done talking about Phil for the rest of this episode. For the remainder. I have a sneaking suspicion this won't be the last week we're discussing the 2 quarterbacks. I'll leave it at that. But do we have any other pieces of the depth chart that really jumped out at you guys today? Because the first one for me, honestly, I know we've been hearing about him, but seeing the or next to Rodney Hammond's name with Desmond Reed, it seems like Desmond Reed's going to be, you know, we've heard about he's electric. He was productive at Western Carolina, but it seems like he really, really is going to be a vital part of this offense, or at least they're planning to make it that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he's the guy. I don't know how high this...
The guy over Rodney?
I think, like, if they, you know, they're going to rotate through guys a bunch. But if I was a betting man, I'd say among running backs, Desmond Reed will have the most touches by a fairly wide margin. I can't really put a number on that. Like, I just don't, you know, I have a hunch that this coaching staff isn't particularly high on Rodney. I think.
Why?
I don't know. I can't really tell you. Like, I think Rodney's good, but also, like, you know, there was just a moment with like Andre Powell last year where, like, you know, people asked him like, hey, why isn't Rodney getting more touches? Like, he's been listed at the top of the depth chart all year. You know, it feels like he's kind of a bruiser where the more touches he gets, the more he can wear down a defense. And Andre Powell was basically like, you know, is that really true? Like, when has Rodney ever rushed for like 100 yards or something? And someone was like, well, the Syracuse game last year or this year, like it was a few weeks after that. And like there was West Virginia 2 years ago where he had, you know, he had like 100 total yards. Maybe a lot of those were receiving or something like that. But he had 100 yards in the Sun Bowl too. Where like, yeah, there's like this example and that example and this other example of like Rodney like playing pretty well when he gets most of the touches. And so I don't know. I think Rodney's also been banged up a little bit too over these past couple of years, which hasn't helped. But like, I don't know. I think they talk about Desmond Reed in a way that they have never talked about Rodney, at least since I've been covering the team. So based off that, I feel like, and just that combined with the speed, explosive playability, that as much as I love Rodney, he does not have the kind of speed that Desmond Reed has. And he also doesn't have the familiarity with the offense. Like Cade Bell brought Desmond here for a reason. So that just all leads me to believe that if they, you know, had to roll with running back, if they're, you know, if it's a 2-minute drill and the game is on the line, I think they're going to have Desmond Reed in there over Rodney Hammond.
I'm going to throw up.
And I mean, that doesn't even say anything about Rodney. Like, that's the thing. I don't even think that means Rodney's bad. I have not been able to square Rodney and his usage in this offense with how good he is, at least in my head, or like what I've seen. I feel like I've seen on the field. Like, I feel like I've questioned myself at every turn about like, Like, I think Rodney's good, but like, is there something I'm not seeing? Like, I don't know. I get confused about it all the time. I still think Rodney's good, but I think they like Desmond Reed a lot more.
Sometimes I get caught in that too. Like, I assume, well, the coaches see
Did
him
I
every day.
imagine all the good things I saw Rodney Hammond do? Were these figments of my imagination when he had 140 all-purpose yards in the Brawl 2 years ago? Or when he closed out the Clemson game as a true freshman? Or when he scored a touchdown in the ACC championship as a true freshman? Did I imagine most of these things? Sorry, Squid.
Well, I was going to say the same thing. I think we see it in the games and think, oh, that guy's great. He's going to do great things if he can stay healthy. But I get caught in the middle, like, well, if the coaches aren't playing him, is there a reason? Or is it the wrong choice? And I don't know anymore. We obviously talked about Vincent Davis's usage quite a bit and are worried that this will become that all over again, where we're giving Vincent Davis 12 carries and he finishes the game with like 24 yards and he's just getting stuffed every play because he's very undersized and he's being used in a very wrong way. So I'm okay with there being an or. They seem to be complements pretty well. Desmond Reed seems like a great receiving back as well, and who knows in Cade Bell's offense how much that'll come into play. But it's all about the situations. Like Rodney Hammond, even the Boston College game, that was the second to last game of the season. He looked great. He busted off a big run.
Yeah, he was what, 120 some yards? Like,
Yeah.
140.
Yeah, like he was great. I think the telling thing is like you said, situationally, like, you know, when they're on the goal line, is who's getting those carries? Is it, I mean, you know, when it's 3rd and 1 from the 1, like, is Rodney getting those carries or is like Daniel Carter getting those carries? You know,
if we flash back to
or
Darren
is
Hall,
Derek Davis, you know, like getting those carries? Like, I think that'll be a big tell. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, you're good. That's a good point too. If we flash back to the Quadri Ollison and Darren Hall duo, I felt like they managed that perfectly. There'd be games where Ollison wouldn't really get going. He was the starter, but they'd be like, you know what, this is a Darren Hall game, and they'd give Darren Hall the bulk of the reps in the second half, and he'd have himself a day. But ever since then, it just seems like, as fans, we're like, why is this guy getting so many carries right now? And we thought maybe if Powell's gone, new offense, figure it out, they play the quote right guy. Maybe Desmond Reed is really good and to be an explosive running back for us, but to give up on Rodney Hammond seems crazy.
I'd agree. I would agree.
So, I mean, this might be a decent point to segue to, because I know what I want to see on Saturday in terms of the running back situation. I'd like to see Rodney Hammond get a majority of the carries and touches. I'd like to see what Desmond Reed can bring to the offense, but I do want to talk a little bit about looking forward to Saturday. What are the things that we need to see or want to see? What do we want to see? What do we need to see in order to make us feel a little bit better about where this team can go in 2024? Are we going to take a step back to what we thought was a floor raised by Pat Narduzzi for this Pitt program? Or are we going to see more of the same from 2023? So, Steven, I mean, you kick it off for us. What's one or two things that you want to see on Saturday from this 2024 version of the Pitt Panthers?
Yeah, I'd say first you and this is kind of basic, but you want to see the operational stuff go smoothly. Like, you don't want to see false starts. You don't want to see 12 men on the field. You don't want to see illegal formations, things like that. We heard that was a problem at one point in camp. Just guys kind of leaving too early in a scrimmage, just that kind of operational stuff. Like, you want to see, the right substitutions and everything with like a new offense and a new coaching staff and some new players and everything like that. You want to see that stuff go smoothly. And then, but that is kind of a layup, quite honestly. I'd say the other one is get Gavin Bartholomew 5 catches. Get him 5 catches. I don't care how many targets it takes, but like, this is one where you should kind of be able to force feed him the ball a little bit. And, I was going to say, get some big plays out of it, but I'd just rather see that they I don't really care if you're force feeding Gavin. I think that in the past that might have been like a problem, but I think that against this opponent in this setting. Just like show us that you're serious, I guess, about it. We've heard a lot of talk, a lot of lip service paid to getting Gavin the ball. And I would like to see, I think it would give a lot of people confidence if that did not just look like lip service this Saturday.
Cade Bell could get himself anointed to the sainthood after his first week in Pittsburgh if he does exactly what you just said.
Yeah. Like, and I don't, like, it's not just, it'll unlock some good things for them. Like, I don't think it's gonna be like pulling teeth for them. Like they should want to do that. That is smart. He is one of your best players. Like, just do it. Just do it. I like, it shouldn't be as complicated as anyone has made it seem over the past 2 years. And if this offense is what it thinks it is, or what everyone says it is, it should be easy. But I'm not going to believe it until I see it, because we have heard, time and time again, yeah, we need to get Gavin the ball. Like, it's like the guy in the hot dog suits. Like, we're trying to find the guy who did this. You guys are in control of this. Like, I don't know. I think Gavin Bartholomew is a good player. And I think if you get in the ball, good things are going to happen. I think that is probably the first thing on my mind when I'm looking at what we want to see from this offense specifically on Saturday.
Hey, they say that's the quarterback's best friend. We've got 2 quarterbacks that are looking to get comfortable out there. No better way than to give it to your freak athlete, 6'5" tight end.
Well, I mean, one of my favorite, I guess you could call it a stat from last year, but Gavin was out for the last 2 games that Nate started against Boston College and Duke. And Carter Johnson, who fine player, but he is not Gavin Bartholomew. And I think maybe over including the garbage time of Notre Dame, had damn near 200 receiving yards in 3 games with Nate Yarnell at quarterback. I'm just saying. I am just saying. Nate likes his tight ends. Some tight ends had some success. He had nearly 200 yards. In those last 2 games, it was 140 yards, I want to say, and a touchdown. He had a touchdown against Duke. So, it is certainly possible. And I think Nate Yarnell certainly thinks tight ends are his best friend.
I'm sure Carter appreciates how you phrase that, but all due respect, he transferred to Florida A&M. He's didn't exactly spurn us for the SEC. So I think that's a fair take on his abilities.
Do you think there's any truth to the rumors that Signetti was just the only person in that building that didn't see it with Gavin? Because what I'd always heard was that he just wasn't very high on him, and it reflected in his personnel usage.
Well, I don't know. I mean, so obviously I'm not privy to those conversations. I mean, Frank and I don't talk anymore. So I can't really ask him, but I remember it was early in the season last year. Someone asked Pat, it seems like Gavin was off the field. I think it might have been after the Cincinnati game, or maybe the North Carolina game.
Cincinnati, because he was off the field on the key drive after having 77 yards the drive before.
Yeah, on 2 catches or something like that. But someone asked him, why is he off the field on so many third downs? Is he taking himself off? Are you guys pulling him off the field? And Pat said, if Gavin can stay out there for however many plays we play, if he can stay out there for 100% of the snaps, he will be out there for 100% of the snaps. So, maybe Frank just didn't see it with him. I think it's usually the position coaches who kind of call substitutions and things of that nature. But, I guess I can't really say for sure. I suppose it makes sense. But I also think it's possible that that the quarterback play didn't exactly lend itself to. I would put it more on the quarterback play than any, Gavin wouldn't have been there was never an or next to, we talked about the ors earlier. There was never an or next to Gavin and Carter Johnson's name. I don't, if I'm remembering correctly, on any depth chart. And I think that would have been an indicator that that Frank wasn't really messing with him. I don't know. Maybe. I guess I can't. I apologize. I can't really say for sure, but
I think we'll find out a little bit based on how much Cade Bell decides to use him. So
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know. Like I said, there was a lot of lip service. Like one of the most painful press conferences we had to do last year was one where, we talked to Frank. I think we talked to him maybe twice, during the regular season last year, and it was, I don't know. Signetti press conferences were always weird because you would ask him a question and then every answer would start with, "Man, we're so blessed to play this great game of football." And it's like, all right, well, that's not really what I asked. That's but there was one day where all the questions asked him were about Gavin. And he's like, "Yeah, man, we really got to get him the ball, don't we?" It's like, "Yeah, man, so what are you going to do about it?" I guess that's plausible that he just kind of paid some lip service to it and never really saw it. I don't think he's the only one that kind of, hears all the hype about Gavin and says, okay, well, it's never had a season with more than 360 yards, maybe. So I don't, if Frank did feel that way, he probably wasn't the only one, but I would be pretty surprised if I don't know, we in the limited targets that he did get, everyone else was able to see how athletic Gavin was and what he was able to do with the ball in his hands. I would just have a really hard time believing that Frank saw that and thought, nah, don't need it. I think I would put it more on the quarterback play than substitutions or any attitudes that Frank had towards him.
Yeah, and a lot of teams this offseason noticed as well. So
Certainly.
we're happy to have him back. And hopefully more than just lip service this year.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't think we've even, maybe shortly earlier, but obviously all the attention is going to be on the offense between the two quarterbacks, who looks better. And quite frankly, Kent State, I think they scored 19 touchdowns all of 2023. So I don't know how much we'll really learn from this defense on Saturday. But I do want to talk a little bit about the defense because as painful and as annoying as this quarterback competition / new offense is probably going to be for the next couple of weeks, I actually am fairly bullish on the defense. I think they can be pretty good. I think the safeties are really good. Corners, I'm a little worried about. Young linebackers, worried about their inexperience, but excited about their athleticism. But come Saturday, the unit that I think we need to see step up a lot is that D-line, particularly defensive ends. Nate Matlack probably going to be the top dog there.
Yep,
now wearing number 2. Yeah. So what do you think we can expect? I would love to see them just dominate a Kent State team that should be pretty bad. I know this isn't going to be Pat Jones and Rashad Weaver getting after the quarterback, but I mean, is there a chance that this unit is pretty good again? Because last year they, all in all, were pretty disappointing.
Yeah, last year they were not very good. I don't think the offense did them any favors, but yeah, they were the worst run defense of Pat Narduzzi's tenure at Pitt, and that's kind of where you don't do that, the whole scheme kind of falls apart. I think there's a trickle-down effect to the rest of the defense. I think the theme of the defense for this year is they lost a lot of experience, but they got more talented. So I think I'm bullish on them too. I'll say that. I like the talent that they have at defensive line. I think they're really deep. I don't think the fact that you see 5 or 6 defensive tackles listed as probable starters is an indication that these guys all stink and they can't find a starter. I think they're just a bunch of pretty good players there. Francis Brew, I think is a star in the making. I think Anthony Johnson was going to be pretty productive this year as an older guy. Isaiah Neal, going to be a pass rush specialist. I really like him. I think about last year, they put in, Devin Danielson and Tyler Bentley and David Green were bigger dudes. They were closer to 300 pounds and just generally slower. And I think about the best defensive tackles from the Narduzzi era, and it's Kalijah Cansey and Jalen Twyman, who their whole thing was they're undersized but quicker. And I think Pitt knows how to work with guys like that. I think those guys play to the scheme a little bit better. So I'm bullish on them too. It's more of a shot in the dark just because so few of these guys have real experience. But they are decidedly more talented up front. I think Nate Matlack, I'm buying a lot of stock in him. He wasn't very productive at Kansas State, but in a defense that I don't think played to his skills very well. That's kind of why he transferred here. I had Jimmy Scott as kind of a breakout candidate going into this year. He's the other starting defensive end. I'm pretty high on the defense, and I think it's going to start with this defensive line being a lot better, especially against the run. And then, you go from there. Like, I love their linebackers. Like, another position that, they lost a lot of experience. Losing Solomon Shields, who, by the way, is going to start at Texas A&M. Starting linebacker Solomon Shields. Looking at their depth chart right now. But like,
and that's not the case for a lot of the guys that left the program last year we were talking about.
No, it is not. But like, Kyle Lewis, I think is going to be awesome. Like he's such a good player and he's such a good athlete. Like I think he's going to be really good. Keeping some experience with Brandon George there, but like just the level of athletes that they have at linebacker, I think are really awesome too. Like that'll help the run defense as well. Like up front, they are just so much more athletic, and I think that's a much better fit for this defense than guys like a David Green and a Devin Danielson and a Tyler Bentley, who like do not at all want to minimize like their contributions to this team. Like I think, especially Green and Danielson, like those guys were not insignificant portions of the 2021s and 2022 teams. But I just don't think like his starters and his full-time guys, they were particularly great fits for this defense. And the guys they have now, I think fit the profile of what Pitt wants to do much, much better than what they had before. So that's part of why I'm higher in the defensive line. And like I said, if they can just be not nearly like, if they can just not be the worst rush defense in the ACC, there's going to be a trickle down effect into the secondary and into the second level where they're able to rush the passer a little bit more. They're able to force teams to put the ball in the air. And then I think, PJ O'Brien's going to have a bunch of picks again this year. Even, like I said, Kyle Lewis might have a bunch as well. Rasheem Biles is like a crazy athlete. I feel like you can pencil him in for like, I guess I'm not going to make any statistical predictions, but like he's going to be a real good like edge rusher coming off the side as an outside linebacker. Like there's going to be more opportunities for those big plays, those splash plays like sacks and tackles for loss and interceptions that kind of the hallmark of the Pitt defense. Like they're going to give up some big plays, I think, because those corners are so inexperienced, especially early on. But, if you can get a pick every once in a while, if you can get a bunch of sacks as well, it'll all even out and you'll be fine.
It feels like it could be a little bit of addition by subtraction because there were some veterans on that defense last year that Narduzzi was very committed to. He developed, he had seen the potential in them, and he wanted to stick with them. And they might have not been the most talented players at their positions or have the most potential. And maybe, that's just because the guys that are coming up now had another year to develop, and maybe they wouldn't have outperformed Kamara or Hayes or any of the defensive tackles last year. But, hearing people like you, people like Chris Peak, so I guess specifically journalists, talk about, these linebackers are going to be freaky. These young defensive tackles are coming in hot. It's very encouraging. And it does make me feel that even though on paper we might have gotten worse at a lot of position groups, we might have unearthed some gems on that depth chart.
I think so. And I think the other thing is you're going to have, like, we're not going to learn this weekend if, like, these defensive tackles are for real or not. Like, they could sack Kent State 9 times, and it really doesn't matter. So give it some time, have some fun. Like, have fun when they're, making havoc in Kent State's backfield this weekend, but reserve some judgment until Cincinnati and especially West Virginia. I'm very interested to see how these guys stack up there because those are obviously much bigger challenges. But I'm excited. I'm excited about the youth that they have there, and part of the reason why just if you can hold on this year, if you can kind of squeak by, and if you can get the whatever 6 wins or whatever you need to keep Pat off the hot seat, I think you can have something really special, especially on the defensive side of the ball going into 25, which is really what I mean. Like, I don't think I'm going to shock anyone when I say like Pitt's not competing for a national championship this year. but like you are building for 2025, and
Agree.
there's a lot to like if you think about it that way, if you frame it that way.
Can we interest you in giving us a record prediction? We typically suggest journalists promise us 10 wins, but
Okay.
you take that however you like.
I can lie to you if it makes you feel better.
Please.
Pat Narduzzi lied to us enough today. You can give us your honest thoughts.
Well, okay, so look, this schedule is not very daunting. Their win totals number was at like 5.5, I think. Last I checked, there are at least 5 games that I think they should win on this schedule, and this is Pitt, so maybe they're probably going to lose a game that they should win, but they're also going to win a game that they probably shouldn't. I'm looking at you, Louisville, and SMU. I think that they are going to win an even 6 games, and it's going to feel really good. It's going to feel like things have stabilized. Going back to a bowl game is going to do wonders for this team. But the schedule doesn't look great. Like, I'm not counting Syracuse as like a likely win, but who knows what they're going to look like with a new coach. I'm not counting Louisville as a sure win, but I don't really know. Like, they're bringing in another like 7th-year transfer quarterback, like
Tyler Shaw.
They lost a lot of talent too. So, who knows? Maybe Louisville isn't as good as I think they are. They've never won at North Carolina, and they got to travel to North Carolina this year. But, maybe that's one where they pull a rabbit out of a hat with North Carolina losing all the talent that they did. And their quarterback situation seems pretty iffy this year, so that's one that they could win as well. Like, there is a path to maybe 8 wins, I think, at a max. But I am going to stick with 6 wins, get back to a bowl, and you look forward to 2025 with some optimism. You're going to know who your quarterback is if that happens. Honestly, either way, you're going to know who your quarterback is at the end of this year, I feel like. I guess, I don't know. I guess I can't count out the fact that maybe both Holstein and Yarnell
Stop.
But I feel like, if my prediction is right, they get to 6 wins. You're going to know who your quarterback is by the end of the year, and that's going to give you a ton of confidence with all the guys that you can potentially have returning going into 2025, and you might be able to compete for something bigger a year from now.
Yeah, next year we have Holstein, Yarnell, and Nico, whatever his last name was, from Tennessee, in the QB room battling out for the starting job.
Is that do you have inside info? Is that a report or?
No, I'm just planting the seeds now, so I can say I was there first whenever it happens.
Yeah, Tennessee's not going to be able to pay his $8 million NIL contract out, but Pitt will.
There we go. Well, just the power of friendship is really going to matter a lot.
Exactly. So, Steven, you said a lot of great things, very informative. The one thing I disagree with is that if Pitt comes out Saturday and really gives it to Kent State, I will get overly excited. I will disregard that Kent State is maybe the worst team in the country, and
as you should, you should
throw logic out the window.
That's what Saturday is all about. Who cares if you overreact and they aren't as good as they look against Kent State, against Cincinnati. That does not matter. That is a September 7th problem, not an August 31st problem.
Yes.
So go. You have my permission to go nuts, Squid. You can really enjoy it. Live it up.
Desmond Reed for Heisman. I'll be tweeting it Saturday night.
It's already in the drafts. Steven, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights. And I don't know if we said congratulations on the new role with the Post-Gazette. You are new Noah, a title that comes with many, many gifts, many boons, and we are very excited to have you in that role. And you best be coming by the tailgate for the necessary 1 beer before you get up to the press box.
I will make sure to do it. I appreciate you guys for having me on. This was fun. Hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Are you or someone you know looking for work in a recession-proof industry? Are you someone that's interested in things like having health care, having a 401k, immediate PTO accrual, an employee assistance program, or referral payouts? Our newest sponsor, Haddad Accelerated Delivery, an Amazon delivery partner, is looking for safety-minded and dependable drivers to join their delivery service team. Be a part of a company that will encourage self-ownership and award bonuses based on exceptional safety and delivery efforts. This is the ideal gig for individuals seeking full-time work or students interested in making some pretty good money during breaks. If you or someone you know is safety-focused, hardworking, organized, efficient, and team-oriented, text HADD to 464-646 to apply. I understand that is an impossible string of letters and numbers, so here it is again. That's HADD to 464-646. For a job that's the total package, get it? Because, it's deliveries. Haddad Accelerated Delivery is the place for you.
And we're back for the first version of the 2024 Loyal Sun Sportsbook. It's been a while, fellas, but we're back, ready to set lines. I'm ready to improve on my previous picks in this segment. Although I set the lines, I am almost always in dead last. If you're a first-time listener or first-time listening to the sportsbook, basically what we're going to do is we're going to create a few fake lines. You can't get them anywhere else, not on FanDuel, DraftKings, or any of those other promotional sites that don't give us any money to shout them out. And this is how we're going to preview the Kent State game. So, fellas, are you ready? Have you gone through the lines? Have you done your research? Money set aside, Loyal Suns points set aside. We ready to go?
I'm ready to clean you guys again for a third year in a row.
Yeah, we didn't actually follow up on a prize or a punishment the last couple of years, so this year we'll see. We've got a few days to think of one.
If we don't establish it right this moment, it's not happening again.
Well, let's just do it. Let's just run into it and make it happen.
Okay, so we're just not going to do it again.
Loser pays for dinner, drinks, case of beer.
We can do better than that. How about our followers tweet at us suggestions for loser punishment?
We've tried that too.
Well, we're going to try it again, and we're going to get a good one, and we're going to confirm it via tweet Friday
prior to
night.
the first game. Yeah, prior to the first game. Okay.
And it'll be set in stone on Twitter/X. And there's no going back once it's up there. That's how Twitter goes.
I want to set a Loyal Sun Sportsbook line on the likelihood of this actually happening.
Plus 200.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, let's kick it off. To start it, I think we have to start with the main topic of discussion, the quarterbacks. Who's going to be more productive on Saturday? And the way we're going to grade that out is who will have more fantasy points. So standard fantasy scoring, I believe it's 1 point every 25 yards, 4 points for a passing touchdown, 6 for a rushing touchdown, 10 for rushing yards, et cetera, et cetera. Who will have more fantasy points this Saturday between Nate Yarnell and Eli Holstein? Squid, want to start us off?
Ooh, I get to go first. So I'm going to zag here. I think everyone's first thought is, well, all I've been hearing is how good of an athlete Eli Holstein is. He's probably going to get some rushing yards, maybe a rushing touchdown.
Good point.
But for some reason, I think Nate Yarnell's going to start the game, and I think he's going to be throwing the ball a little bit more. They're going to let Yarnell air it out. He might hit a deep shot to Mumpfield, get a lot of yards early, and from the rest of the game, they'll just go through the motions. Not a lot of opportunities for a lot of points. So I'm going Nate Yarnell. He's going to connect on a deep ball.
I agree with Squid. I want Yarnell. I'm very much team Yarnell in all of this. And if Holstein takes the job and is awesome, I will just be pleasantly surprised. But aside from that, I agree with Squid's rationale because we don't know how they're going to be mixing them in. If it's going to be drive and then a drive, or 2 drives, then 2 drives, or a quarter and then. But I think that they will give Yarnell the benefit of actually starting the game. And if they do a couple series, if they let him get the first quarter, he's going to be a position where he can throw the ball. And if Holstein's playing, more drives later in the game, it's more likely than not that they'll keep the ball on the ground with him, give him a diminished playbook, and Yarnell will get more opportunities. So I think he'll get more opportunities, and I do think he's probably the more game-ready quarterback right now.
Wow, you both went Yarnell. I was kind of leaning that way early, and this is where I get myself into trouble here, zagging away from you two, and then give up a ton of points. But I'm going to go Holstein. I have also been Team Yarnell throughout this whole process. I think all of us have, and we've kind of been driving that train. With today's development of this clearly being still wide open, I think they're just giving us a soft launch for the eventual naming Eli Holstein QB1. And come Saturday, who knows? He might get the majority of the snaps. Other rationale I can give for this is apparently he's more athletic. I haven't seen that yet. Maybe he scampers for a rushing touchdown. Maybe that's the difference between Nate and Eli. But I'm going to take Holstein here because I don't know. The way things are moving, the trajectory makes it seem like Eli is going to be QB1 when we're all said and done here. Okay, prop number 2. We're going to go over under 15.5 touches for the Baby Cats. Now, I'm sure all of you are wondering, who are the Baby Cats? David, can you elaborate?
Yeah, so it's a placeholder nickname right now. We're kicking around a few, but the Baby Cats would refer to the 3 Western Carolina Catamount transfers who, despite being a little bit undersized for the FBS level, all indications are that the offense will be run through them this year for some reason. And there's been quite a bit of consternation on the show about whether that's a good idea. And we're interested to see how it plays out. Now, again, we are not married to the Baby Cats. The WC3, the Catamount crew have all been thrown around. We're working on it. But this is kind of the working title right now. And Dylan, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but the line is set as 15.5 touches for the WC3.
Mm-hmm.
15.5 is where we're set. So Sincere Lee is not listed on the depth chart. I believe he's banged up or injured, whatever term you want to use for not going to play because he's not physically able to. So that just leaves Raphael Poppy Williams and Desmond Reed, who our wonderful friend Steven seems to think Desmond Reed might just be the number 1 running back on this team. He's also listed as one of the kick returners with Kenny Johnson. He's listed as the punt returner. So clearly going to be a pretty concerted effort to get him the ball. So with that said, I don't know. He might get 15 touches himself. And then we've seen a lot of hype around Poppy Williams. He got the single digit number 5 in the most recent update to the roster numbers. So I'm going to go over here. I think they're going to touch. I think Desmond Reed's going to be involved early and often. And then I think Raphael Poppy Williams is going to find himself on the field often as well.
So we're saying kick returns count as touches? Is that the official ruling?
Yes.
Okay. I'll say over as well.
Wow. Yeah.
I agree with what Dylan said, so I'm not going to repeat him. I think the other big difference is Narduzzi has alluded to Rodney Hammond and his injuries and being banged up pretty often. Almost anytime someone brings up Rodney, he brings up how he gets hurt. He just needs to stay healthy, and they've been careful with him this camp season. So I would expect Desmond Reed to, I don't know if he's going to quote unquote start the game as like the first running back out there, but get the bulk. And then once the game's in hand, they'll go on to Derek Davis and down the line. Hopefully we see some of the younger guys too. But
yeah,
you know what? Now that I say that, I'm going to say under. I think Desmond Reed gets about 10 touches. Poppy Williams might get 2, but I think we're going to see a lot of like the 3rd and 4th and 5th string running backs like Jules Goff, Derek Davis. Who knows? Maybe Grandpa Dan Carter as well. So I'll go under.
TJ Harvison.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm going over. If including punt and kick returns wasn't enough, I was shocked Poppy Williams did not have an or next to his name. I was convinced it was going to be Kanate Mumfield at wide receiver 1, Kenny Johnson at wide receiver 2, and then, I thought Dejon Reynolds alone, but at the very least, maybe Dejon Reynolds or Poppy Williams. To see Poppy Williams firmly in that wide receiver 2 position told me all I need to know about the way that they are going to be spoon feeding these Western Carolina guys the ball.
All right, so
Dylan, is that Desmond Reed with you right now?
This is our co-host. I know he made an appearance a few weeks ago. He's been hanging out with his Mickey Mouse toy for most of the show, but I think he wanted some screen time, so he's up here on my lap right now. He actually told me he's going to go under for the touches for the baby cats. So
all right, so that's 2 for under and 2 for over. We're even.
Yeah, if we want to put
good
that
line
in there.
created by Dylan. That's what they want in the sports book.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
We'll collect the juice. Total yards for Kent State, one of the worst offenses in the FBS last year. Over under 199.5 total yards of offense for Kent State on Saturday.
I'll go first. I'll go over. I just think if they'll get one early big play that's going to make a bunch of people in the stands pull their hair out and then get shut down most of the rest of the game. But then I like to think our defensive starters will be getting pulled relatively early and they can move the ball on our scout team if they want. So I'll go over. We won't care at that point.
Do you know how many yards Wofford had last year?
198.
126. And a lot of that was
Jesus.
on the last drive where they had a 75-yard touchdown pass. When somebody tripped or it was OPI and it wasn't called, something really weird happened for them to get that.
And our buddy called it the worst beat of all time.
Yeah.
Because we gave up a touchdown at the end of the game.
So I'm going to say under, and my reasoning is we have a lot of new faces. There is some competition, so these guys want to prove they're for real because they haven't had a taste of being a starter before, so they're going to be going hard. Maybe towards the end it gets a little ugly. Who knows? I don't know a whole lot about Kent State, but what I do know is I was looking up a preview for Kent State this year. Somebody actually made one of those. I did a little bit of research. No one is high on them yet again.
Who made a Kent State football preview? Just curious.
This is College Football News, and this is just a screenshot, so I can't scroll to the top and shout out whoever wrote this article, and you'll hear why.
We aren't going to belittle the MAC.
Yeah, so this
Make
guy
your point.
said,
We aren't belittling the MAC.
Yeah, he said Kent State's key player, Tommy Ulatowski. He's their sophomore quarterback. But in his little write-up, he says, the team needs one quarterback and a leader to count on to keep the chains moving, and Ulatowski will likely get the first look. He wasn't terrible last year. He at least kept the mistakes to a minimum. So their key player last year wasn't terrible. That's what they said. So I think we're going to literally suffocate them, and they will not get 200 yards.
I think I'm going to go under as well, although I did hear a quote this week that frightened me a bit. I believe it was Key Thompson, David's boy from OU. They asked him, he's played Kent State in the MAC before, and they asked him, see, my man's already disagreeing with my pick here. But so he said that the key to stopping Kent State was to stop the RPO. I've watched Pitt fail.
Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. And I've seen Pitt get burnt by RPOs by a MAC team before, but I'm still going to go under because I think Kent State is just that bad.
God damn it.
All right, so we got 2 unders and 1 over. David, this was a good prop you had. it's an unfortunate one that we have to put on here, but I think it was needed given all that we're going to be dealing with. Multiple quarterbacks, new offense.
Yeah, and I'm going to try not to read too much into this one, but over under 2.5 procedural penalties. Squid, you hit it on the head. 2 different quarterbacks who have been splitting time in training camp in a new offense with a ton of new personnel, kind of testing things out on the fly. We're going to see some false starts, some illegal motions, some probably not a lot of delays of game if the motto's play fast, score faster, but a lot of movement related issues before the snap. So I'm interested to hear your guys' take on just how many of those we are going to see.
I'll say over. I don't think 3 is like a ton, even if you have a lot of continuity in the first game, and we don't. So I think we screw up a couple times, but hopefully it's not like the first drive and we're not looking like chickens with our heads cut off too bad.
I'm gonna go over. They're playing 2 different quarterbacks. It's a brand new offense. They're going over on this. Hopefully not too far over. If we get away with, yeah, me too. If we get away with 3, I'll feel pretty good about how the offense performed on Saturday.
Over. I agree with all of you. It's inevitable. And if they go under, I will be wildly impressed.
Now we're on to a favorite. It's a recurring one every week. We'll do it every week. Eventually, once we find out who the best players are, we'll probably scale how many points you get for picking certain players. Like, spoiler, this pick is the first touchdown scorer of the game. 2 years ago, if you picked Izzy and he scored first, you would get 1 point. If you picked anyone else and they scored first, you'd get like 4. And we'd all try to get creative and pick somebody other than Izzy. But it would be Izzy every week. So we'll see how the season goes and if there's a clear-cut touchdown guy. But at this point, I think it's going to be interesting to see who we think is going to be the first touchdown scorer of the season without any prior knowledge of what this offense looks like.
May I go first?
Go for it.
Desmond Reed. Steven convinced me earlier. They're running the offense through Desmond Reed. And you know what? If he looks awesome, I will take back all the things I've said about him being small or it being ill-fated to run our offense through 3 transfers from an 8-4 FCS school. But I think they get Des Reed on the board early.
You don't get any bonus points if you predict this part right, but what method? Is it going to be a goal line carry, reception, long run?
Give me a slip screen.
Okay.
I'll go. And this is just me trying to speak things into existence.
I know exactly where this is going.
Gavin Bartholomew.
Yep.
Please, let's get him an easy one early. I don't care if we're down on the goal line. Maybe get him a little catch in the flat, easy walk-in touchdown, or we can throw him a jump ball, or any other method of him scoring. Shoot, if they go wildcat with Bart, and he scores that way, that works too. I want to see him with the ball in his hands, and I want to see him in the end zone.
See, if I was going to speak something into the existence, I would say one of our receivers, but I think we're going to get down close to the goal line, and we're going to use Rodney Hammond early and not often. Like I said earlier, I don't think he's going to get a whole lot of playing time, but I think he will early. Yeah, I think he's going to pound one in typical Rodney Hammond fashion, run over a defender or 2, get in the end zone, just so we can be mad about him not being used enough more later in the season.
It's time.
It's time.
Our first predictions of the 2024 season. We'll knock out both these in one. Give us, will Pitt cover Right now, we're looking at a line of 23.5 and give us a final score prediction. Squig, can you kick us off here?
I can. And I think I'm going to be taking an alternate line if I can find that on any of the real sports books. I think Pitt just wins 48-0. I think Kent State is going to be bad, and we're just going to crush them. I'm ready to get delusional.
Let's get delusional. Squid, I'm with you. Pitt covers. Final score of, I was going to say 42-7, but you got me a little fired up, Squid. I'm going to go 45-3. Pitt's going to win 45-3. The National Guard's going to come marching in, and we're going to handle business against the Golden Flashes. Coach Dews has entirely too much to prove this season. And while I do think we're still going to get a semi-truncated playbook, I think he is going to be a little merciless.
Love the optimism.
Like Nixon.
There you go. I know you were waiting all episode for that one.
Thank you.
I think they do cover. I don't think the line's big enough, but I do think it's going to be a slower start. I don't think we're going to be firing off on all cylinders early, but I do think they ultimately do get a cover. I think Vegas has a pretty good idea of what these things look like. I'm going to go 31-7. We're going to be a little bummed with how they look in the first half. Offense isn't as explosive as we think, but they're going to have some big explosive plays, maybe a defensive or special teams touchdown mix in there. Pitt ultimately covers. We get the backdoor cover. We're all pumped as we walk out of the stadium. Still a little disappointed with how everything went, how they started slow, but ultimately a comfortable win over a Kent State team that is just poised to be awful.
Good teams win. Great teams cover. All three of us picked Pitt to do both. So I guess that means we're a great team.
God, I just can't wait to be in a lot with a beer in my hand on Saturday morning, man. It's like my life has led up to this moment.
I mean, if you needed any more evidence that we are back, we all just picked Pitt to cover 23.5 points. We are so back. Football is back. And the baby is pumped up. These are all very happy streams, by the way. But he can't really talk yet, but I'm starting to, the more time I spend around him, I can kind of tell what he's saying. And he just
What's he saying?
He just told me Pitt 12-0, hail Loyal Sons of Pittsburgh. Signing off. Thanks for listening. See you all Saturday. Let's have a good old day. Hail to Pitt.